When I was 15 years old, I dropped out of high school for about 6 months. It was just too dangerous for me to keep going. You see, I was living in Jerusalem, and this was the dawn of the first Gulf War. My parents were in the Foreign Service, and they were assigned to the American consulate there. Now, the road between my home in Jerusalem and my high school in the suburbs of Tel Aviv was long. It was a 2-hour commute, and there were several potential bombing targets along the path. So rather than risk sending me to school every day, my mother kept me at home. Now, this was lucky for her because she had a problem. In the days leading up to the first Gulf War, a rumor started in the ultra-Orthodox community that eventually spread to the whole town. People believed that the United States government was going to send a giant ship to Israel that would sail all American citizens away to safety. And so people started showing up in droves to my mother's office to pick up their tickets for the ship. So rather than going to school or staying at home, I was stationed in front of the consulate where it was my job to tell people that there was no ship coming. In hindsight, this rumor sounds really stupid, right? But you gotta understand, we were scared. We didn't know if Saddam had chemical capability or aim. So if you can imagine a 15-year-old kid standing in front of an angry and irate horde, all I could say is, there's no ship coming. Usually, the ultra-Orthodox Jewish man will not look a woman in the eye, but they looked me in the eye, and they leaned in, and they yelled, and I remember that their cheeks were pink, and their breath was hot, and all I could say is, there's no ship coming for any of us. And it was the hardest job I've ever had to do. So 20 years later, when I was asked to talk to you about women and leadership in corporations, part of me wanted to say no, because I never want to stand up in front of another audience and say, there's no ship coming. But the statistics on women in the workplace are terrible. While we are 58% of the undergraduate degrees awarded in this country and 53% of the entry-level workforce, we're 37% of middle management. We're 28% of the vice presidents. We're 14% of the executives. And in the Fortune 500, we're 3% of the CEOs. So to put that in perspective, what that means is that every one of my male colleagues is twice as likely as I am to be promoted. And there's no ship coming. And this conversation is stale. Do you remember the movie 9 to 5? So Dolly Parton and Jane Fonda and Lily Tomlin kidnap their boss, Dabney Coleman, and they tie him up in bondage gear, and while he's out, they institute workplace reforms like on-site childcare and flex hours, and that was 30 years ago. And we're still talking about things like childcare and flex hours like that's going to be the key to unlocking gender parity in corporate leadership. And at our current rate of progress, that's going to take another 500 years to do. And there's no ship coming. So now I'm reading in the literature about this concept of sticky floors instead of glass ceilings. And the idea is that women are holding themselves back. We are not fighting the way our male colleagues are for recognition and for promotions and for the respect we deserve. The idea is that we are afraid that the expectation that a corporate executive be able to work at any time from any place is inconsistent with our need for balance. So even before we have children, we take ourselves out of the game. So now it's our fault that we haven't risen further. And there's no ship coming. There's a professor at the University of California, Berkeley, professor of psychology named Stephen Hinshaw, and he writes about something he calls the triple bind facing adolescent girls. He says that society has this set of expectations on our daughters that it doesn't have on our sons. We expect our daughters to be successful. They have to be athletic and smart. We expect them to be friendly and popular, and we expect them to be beautiful and sexualized at a very early age. And so Hinshaw is writing about what this does to our daughters and what they are in turn doing to themselves because of this. But what I can't find in the literature is anyone talking about the triple bind facing adult women today. We're expected to be homemakers. You've got to be Martha Stewart and Claire Huxtable rolled into one, raising college-bound, well-adjusted children, and you have to do it with grace and poise and charm. You've got to be beautiful and thin and forever young. And you've got to man up at work and be a corporate executive. And by the way, a very outdated notion of what a corporate executive is, one that doesn't have room for an individual contributor who chooses to hone her craft, but really only expects someone to pursue higher and higher levels of management. And I think that's the most insidious bind of all, because it pits women against women, because it's your fault if you're not pursuing that corner office. You're bringing womankind down. I left Jerusalem to go to Stanford, and I remember my freshman orientation, a professor spoke to us. He was a professor of computer science, and he was a great man and a wonderful teacher and totally lit up by his work. And one of his concerns was that there weren't enough women in engineering. So I became an industrial engineer. Not because I loved it or the work lit me up, but it seems that that's what womankind needed me to do. And I definitely appreciate the legitimacy that my technical degree gives me, but I am certainly glad that I had the sense to exit the field after I graduated. And I'm not crazy. Every day I watch women tie themselves up in knots trying to be what they think their family or society or some larger cause needs them to be. And it's generous and it's selfless, but it doesn't make them happy. I mean, how can you be happy if you're supposed to outwomen the women at home and outmen the men at work? And I don't even know if the corporate game is one that women are biologically or culturally programmed to want to play. If you think about it, the corporation is an entity created by and for men, by the way, who exists to pursue larger and larger market share against its competition, right, for greater and greater profit. And internally, individuals are rewarded for pursuing larger and larger turf within that organization. I'm not an anthropologist, but that looks like the games that boys were playing on the schoolyard when they were trying to stay king of the hill and capture all of the marbles. Me and my girlfriends were playing house. They were creative role-playing games that didn't have winners and losers like that. Barbie might be evil for the body image she is giving our daughters, but she is genius and will stick around because she speaks to the games that girls will always play. And I'm not saying that we can't be competitive and that we can't win, but I wonder if we have to give up our femininity to do it. That's what I thought. When I left school and entered the workplace, I found an environment that expected me to be achievement-oriented, assertive, and competitive. And I saw no room for femininity, so I gave mine up. I made it very clear to my management that I was not going to have a child. I was not going to take myself out of the game. I distanced myself from my female coworkers as if to say, don't think of me the way you think of them. I palled around with my male coworkers, making it very clear that I was never interested in relationship. I am pictured in a 1997 issue of Fortune magazine in a crew cut. And I was rewarded for my assertiveness. I was promoted 7 times in 7 years. But by the time I was 30, there was no more of me to sacrifice. I had given up my educational pursuit to further the cause of womankind. I had given up my identity to further the cause of my career. And I was so tied up in knots that had my ship come in, I wouldn't have been able to get on board. So I finally had to step back and really think about what would make me happy, and what game did I really want to be playing here, and what can I commit myself and my life to? And it's 6 years later, and I still don't know the answer to that question. But I am happier being in that pursuit. And what I see is that when women figure out what they want to commit to, they can succeed. In the United States, women are 47% of the executive directors of nonprofit company organizations and 48% of nonprofit board members. And that says to me that women have a capacity for leadership and power and achievement. And there is something in the corporation that either doesn't allow that or doesn't inspire that. Now, I choose the corporation. That's the game I play every day. And I have to admit, sometimes I show up at work and I feel just as foreign as a black kid from Berkeley, California in Jerusalem. But the difference is I'm not trying to assimilate anymore, because fitting into a culture won't change it. So no, there's no ship coming to save me or to ensure my success. But if I look at the shore, I see that in a lot of places in American corporations, we are the majority now, which means that we now have an opportunity to create the change in the corporation that we want to see. And I think that starts by redefining what it means to win in corporate life, and perhaps bring some of the girl games into that sphere. Can you imagine a world in which we evaluate corporations not by the percentages of women in power, but by the percentages of women who are happy? Can you imagine a company that rewards its managers not for having larger teams, but having teams with higher job satisfaction? Can you imagine a manager who rewards his employees not for their pursuit of power, but for the pursuit of their passion and their purpose? If that's a game you want to play in corporate America, I do have 3 pieces of advice. First, you've got to find a sponsor who will be your advocate for your career. We spend a lot of time talking about mentors and coaches, and that's great. But at the end of the day, careers are made in closed-door executive meetings where your organization's alignment is being discussed. And you need to have someone in that room who's going to throw your name in the hat. If you don't, you could be the best employee your company has, but you'll never be given the opportunity to change your career with a new leadership offer. And that means networking up, and not just to your manager, but up and broad. Second, whatever game you play, you're not going to win every round, and women need to learn how to fail. If I do see a difference between my male and female colleagues, it's that the men treat failure as a learning opportunity and they move on. And women confuse failing with being a failure, and we let it take us out of the game. A few years ago at Oracle, I pitched a product that I thought was going to be quick to build and make a lot of money. It was really slow to build and never made any money. And I thought that tainted my reputation. And so I didn't pitch anything for a long time until I noticed that my male colleagues went right on pitching. They felt no such stigma. And had I been a ball player, I would have taken myself out of the game after the first strikeout. And finally, I think whatever game you are here at a corporation to play, we have to respect the game that all women are there to do. Whether you're shooting for the corner office, or you're trying to pick yourself up off of a sticky floor, or you're perfectly happy being an individual contributor and doing your job well, the corporation needs us all to thrive and succeed in order to be successful. And so we need to respect the games that all women play. The statistics will follow. And frankly, a woman's happiness is more important than any statistic. So I wake up every morning and I ask myself, what can I do to create a workplace that works for women? And I invite you to be in that inquiry. What can you do to create a workplace that works for all? And in this question, I am no different than the CEO of my company or the man who makes my salad every day. We all have an opportunity to create a world that works. Thank you.